Sinivusele sinimukele maswati lamahle ngumsombuluko sicala liviki lelisha sithemba ukuthi niphilile nibe nempelasonto lenhle nale busisekile dinge mashumi lamabili nakuwona the 24th of February 2025. Very good morning and welcome to Kusile Professor Bito lami ngilungelele bakakula. Thank you for tuning in lo mhla ekseni sibuya kuye impelasonto lenkhulu impelasonto yabo Bhejane sitabe sicocisana na Secretary General welibutfo lelibutfo lokangane libutfo labo Bhejane lokangane sabe sicocisana naye make Joyce Villane kuva ukuthi umsebenzi omkhulu ebuhleni uhambe kanjani kule mpelasonto. Sibonile ke over the weekend ukuthi kunengilokwendekile nengonyama imemetele ukuthi libutfo selitabane liholide sifuna kuva ukuthi ngabe lokho kubaphatha kanjani babo Bhejane nekuva nje ukuthi ngabe umsebenzi uhambe kanjani. Sibonile ukuthi bekunabo somabhizinisi bekuna laba buya ngaphandle kwakulele ama tourist sifuna kuva ukuthi umsebenzi overall uhambe kanjani. Sidabe sikhulumisana naye lo mhla ekseni at 6:30 siphinde sibuke isimo sempelasonto ukuthi impelasonto ihambe kanjani ngitibhidi gigaba letibikiwe emaphoyiseni nemxhumanisi wamaphoyisa nesive phindile Vilakade. Siphinde sibuke letindzaba temidlalo letenteke kule mpelasonto sidabe sinensaseli yethu yetemidlalo Linda Master Dlamini lo mhla ekseni kuva ukuthi impelasonto ihambe kanjani futhi lesingayibheka kuleli viki nasibuka tona tindzaba temidlalo. Ungayenzwa okumanje sibuke nathi lethamba imbili Eswatini Daily News. Ansasibukele thamba imbili Eswatini Daily News lomuhla Luthango received gifts from their majesties at Bukano ceremony. Thousands of women under the Luthango regiment gathered at Buhleni Royal Residence this past weekend for the much anticipated first session of the annual Bukano ceremony. The vibrant cultural event, which celebrates the marula fruit and its significance in Eswatini's tradition, saw Luthango being presented with beautiful gifts from their majesties. And in other news, Eswatini lauds EU support in governance and economic growth in Belgium. Antiletinye thamba imbili long-acting injectable PrEP is now available in Eswatini. Nasibuka temidlalo Eswatini Daily Sport. Green Mamba reclaims top spot. Correctional Services side beat Rangers 3-1 to leapfrog Royal Leopard at the summit, while Ezulwini United stand Mbabane Swallows with a 2-0 win on Sunday at Mavuso Sports Center. And in other news, Mwase appreciate point in his first game. And on international news, Liverpool beat Man City to extend lead. Until leto leti hamba imbili is 3 minutes after 6. Tatar kefu sibuya netindzaba.
Kude lesinye isikhathi ngaphandle kwalesi
aba research bafunze.
being risky means ukuthi nalokuwa kwayo kulula
nathi kufuna senze ukukhicita lokusemndeni.
Simize sirimukele natitindzaba selesemhlaba sesibusise ukuthi umkhosi webugano usale uba neliholide ngwenyama ivetelo nayiphefumulela umhlaba umkhosini webugano esigodlweni ebuhleni. Lo mkhosi bawukathi ubusiswe nakuba khona kondlovukazi imhlakazi.
Lisasasa kulomkhosi wobugano nalonyaka libe ngulelisedulu umgcumo nenjabulo bekusolwa kubonakele njalo kilo libutho lelithango naselangeni lesibili lawo mkhosi. Umkhosi wobugano nguleminye yemikhosi lelive litichenya ngayo kanye kuphinde futhi kube ngumkhosi lowatiwa mhlaba wonke njengoba uhlanganisa leSwatini netive temhlaba. Kulo mkhosi kulapho emakhosi abandawonye nelibutho lelithango kanye nesive seMaswati Songkhana ukugubha lo mkhosi. Amakhosi abesingethwe ngulowa-ke waba umengameli eveni laBotswana, Lieutenant General Ian Khama. Lona mkhosi bukade ungenelwe nativakashi temakhosi letibese tivusela kiso silo nakiyo indlovu yemhlaba. Emakhosi kulona mkhosi abekade futhi asingethwe nabanxusele emave abo kuleli netinhlangano letibambisa live etinhlangothini letehlukene tentfutfuko kubala labambalwa. Belikhona nelibandla letindvuna tembuso bobabetikhulu kanye nalabanye labakhulu embusweni. Sasiphefumlela umhlaba, silo semhlaba sibusise saphindze sapha uluthango luholidi kule mkhosi wobuganu njengoba cishe yonke imikhosi yelive inalo luholide.
Thango kubukiwe ke ukuhlala phansi njengoba kusawu nakuya imisebenzi leya naleya kungenteka kanjani umsebenzi kwabonakala ukuthi njengoba besineliqhawe mahogosa sophusa kwezinto izintaba kubonakala ukuthi sineliholiday lakhe lesiligubha kunjalo siyathi ukuthi angajabula kakhulu leliholiday lakhe salelithathwa libisa ukuthi nase siya ehlane njengoba siye siqale lapha ebuhleni nase siye ehlane ke bese ukuthi ke lo msombuluko ube leholiday lelithatha. Kusho ukuthi ke lithango sesawuthatha kholwane njoba kunguJuly 22 akwadi ukuthi abuye ngalapha elithangweni ukuthi ke sesitabe sicelebrate lusuku lwamahogosi phindze kube lusuku lwelithango. Awuthango njoba ngimemedela lokhu kusho sindabeni tibuta singabe liqala nini njoba sesiyehlane ngalomsombuluko ke wana sesifike ehlane njoba sitawusuka lapha nje sengilapho leholiday la usebenza khona lithango.
Ingonyama iphindze yadumisa uluthango ngekuthanza emasiko nemisebenzi leselwentile libutho kulomkhosi walonyaka.
Luthango sidumisile wonke umsebenzi emandla lenwafakile kubonakala ukuthi ke temihambo nemasiko neluthango liyabonakala umgqumo walo uvele umkhulu sibili kungena kweno lapha eminyakeni leyengcile bevele nje ukuthi sekuphelile nyalo yena ningene solo kubonakala ukuthi kusangena libutho lisangena litohlamela ngebukhulu benoluthango lokho ke ngilokuhle kakhulu siyathemba ukuthi nakusasa nanini ndawuqhubeka nento njalo luthango.
Indlovukazi Mhlekazi ithe kumcoka ukuthi buphezu komkhono bubambisise buve yaphindze futhi yadumisa kutikhandla kwelibutho ukuthi noma bekunemimoya netangcotho eveni kodwa lukhonile chwanza libuye naso sithelo.
Bekunene buve bethu sifanele sibubambe. njengoba nani nje sibubambile libuve bethu njengoba noma live belihlaselwe imoya nezangotho kodwa bophezulu komkhono baphumile bathola ngalinye lelo ligano ukuthi ngeke sihlale kubethe lesikuthwalako masiye enkosini yethu. Siyati-ke ukuthi bophezulu komkhono abalali ngoba masilapha bekunene asikethi ukuthi mbe sibukele isihlahla sodwana sibuke konke ngoba benjoba benikuthwele nje nithwele lokwa nalokwa silive siyajabula ukuthi nembala noma ngaba sekuqhamuka indlala khona lapha nathi singaphila ngakhona ngoba sifanele sisuku le nyoni lesiphezulu komkhono isuke ikhuluma nasi ukuthi asisukume sibe bophezulu komkhono masenda lokwa live liyathuthuka.
Ibutho lelithango lendele tibukwako-ke embi kwemakhosi enkhundleni njengoba bekulilanga lokuthi libutho libukise ngebugabazi balo. Lokhu kulandzela ukuthi belivele lethembisile ukuthi nalonyaka litawubukisa enkhundleni. Ngemuva kwekushingelida libese ligidza ummiso lovulwe ngiyo indvuna yakaHhohho. Ngemuva kommiso kugidwe njiloni lebekukathe kube kulapho emakhosini nawo agidza nalo libutho. Bese kufika isikhathi sekuthamba ngemuva kokuthi kugidwe njiloni le bekuyinkhomba yekufika emaphethelweni kwemmiso. Kusaqhubeka sona sigaba sekuthamba tingcungcuzile kwadzela sibukeli bayesikhulu enkhundleni ungenile wenta letibuko wako. Balukatana nabo babengulabanye labathambako nebamva benkosi labadzala nabo abakasaleli ngephandle labanye labathambile kube batukulu. Inkhundla ekuthambeni ivulwe ngiyo indvuna yelibutho esifundeni sakaHhohho. Lomuhla kulisonto libutho libheke ukuthi lishaye tandla livalelise emakhosini. Etintsabeni kubika Pholile Maziya esigodlweni ebuhleni.
Umhlonishwa Mvunankhulu Russell Dlamini sewutshele abaholi bemave alabamhlophe kanye nebelivekati le-Afrika labangenele umhlangano wesithathu wesigungu lesibuke ukuvusetela kabusha kusetshenziswa kwetindzaba tepolitiki ukuthi abemukele baphindze bahloniphe itindlela letahlukene tekuphatsa emave. Kwenca lapho bafunisise lwati ngaletindlela letehlukene kunekuthi bajake kugcika loku labangakwati.
Kulo mhlangano lobanjelwe Residence Palace edolobheni Brussels, Mvunankhulu wetfule inkulumo yakhe kubaholi lababuya kumava labamhlophe nasevekatini le-Afrika labangetulu kwema-30. Kule nkulumo Mvunankhulu utshela abaholi ukuthi live laseswatini liphetfwe ngendlela lehambisana netimiso taso lesigungu se-Global Council for Political Renewal letibeka embili kuhlonishwa kwemalungelo ebantfu kuphatsa ngebucotfo nangekulandzela umtsetfosisekelo.
Our governance model, the Tinkhundla system, embodies these principles both in spirit and in practice. Ethical governance is upheld as a fundamental principle in Eswatini. The Commission of Human Rights and Public Administration is constitutionally mandated to oversee ethics and human rights compliance, ensuring that public administration adheres to principles of integrity, fairness, and accountability. These institutions collectively reinforce the ethical foundations of Eswatini's governance system, promoting public trust and good governance. Justice in Eswatini is upheld through a constitutionally enshrined separation of powers that guarantees an independent judiciary as outlined in our constitution. The judiciary operates autonomously, free from interference by the executive and legislative branches, ensuring fairness and impartiality in legal proceedings. Additionally, our community-based governance model ensures that justice is accessible and participatory, with local decisions being integrated into national development plans.
Mvunankhulu ucube kwatshela labaholi ukuthi bohulumende ngekwehlukana kwabo kumcoka ukuthi bahloniphe amasiko etive ngekwehlukana kwawo njengalokunawa yadzinga kugcina kahle ngoba ayasita ekuhlanganiseni sive.
This has been evident in the way our cultural institutions like Ngwala and Umhlanga ceremonies have united the nation even in difficult times. The diversity of governance models around the world should serve as an inspiration for innovative solutions to shared challenges. Eswatini's experience demonstrates how traditional and modern systems can coexist to promote sustainable development and social harmony.
Mvunankhulu wephethe inkulumo yakhe ngekuthi atshele baholi ukuthi ngilelo nalelo live linendlela yalo lehlukile leliphethwe ngayo. Ngakho-ke baholi abakuhloniphe lokho bangadikhanzi sebafuna ukuthi emave alandzele indlela yekuphatha levela kwangathi seyishayo yaba ngumtsetfo.
Excellencies, as we gather here today, under the theme of ethics, justice, and peace, I urge all to appreciate the uniqueness of governance structures across the world. True political renewal is not in the forced conformity to a single model, but it is in the willingness to embrace different approaches that work for different societies. Our world is stronger when we respect and celebrate diversity in governance. Our experience has shown that respect for tradition, coupled with openness and constructive dialogue, provides a strong foundation for social cohesion and national development.
Kubambisana kwebaholi ngekwelekelelwa ngilesigungu se-GCPR ngona baholi labavumelene ngako ukuthi kutawugucula kusetshenziswa kwetindzaba tepolitiki emhlaba wonke. Kanti-ke baholi baphindze bavumelana ngavilinye ukuthi ngilelo nalelo live alilondvolote liphindze livikele lelinako ngoba kugucuka kwetimo emhlabeni sekwenta ukuthi kungasateki ukuthi ngiyiphi indlela lengiyo bohulumende lekufanele baphathe ngayo. Kubika John Molele ngisedolobheni Brussels even leBelgium.
Ingonyama ithi umkhosi wengcwala umcoka njengobe uhlanganisa inkosi nesive sayo babe munye. Ingonyama ekusho lokhu ngesikhathi imelelwe liphini landvunankulu imphungathuli idladla emkhosini wengcwala yebangoni lobanjelwe eChipata eZambia. Lo mkhosi ungenelwe nalizinyana umfanenkosi Banzile, umfanenkosi lonkokhela kanye nenkosi yebangoni Mpezeni wesine.
Bekungumkhosi wekuvuselana, kukhumbulana nekusikisa kwemagabazi.
Sihambe safika eZambia thunywa ngumswaba lapha emanzini thunywa ngumswaba lapha emanzini.
Ingwenyama lebeyimelelwe liphini landvunankulu imbonga Thuli Dladla ithi emasiko abalulekile kufanele endluliselwe nasesitukulwaneni.
And of course, in both Eswatini and Zambia, these ceremonies affirm the sacred bonds between the king and his people. I think you will all agree with me that this sacred bond actually creates a firm relationship between the king and his people. Our monarchs are not only political leaders, but spiritual symbols of unity, continuity, and the preservation of tradition. It also speaks to the renewal of a nation. Just as Indwala is a time of cleansing and renewal in Eswatini, Indwala is also a moment of spiritual rejuvenation for the people.
Inkosi Mphezeni wesine lokhulumelwe nguDumsani Tembo ithite kusho lokukhulu ukufika kwelibandla lelibuya eSwatini lelithunyelwe ingwenyama.
Honorable God, we would like to assure you that our Ngoni are eager and looking forward to coming again for Umhlanga. For those of us who have been in Eswatini during Umhlanga, we have every good reason to look forward to that event. We will definitely come, and please count on us. Through this year's Ngwala ceremony, it is my hope that a message of remembrance of who we are and where we come from should be taken.
Mengameli waseZambia Hakainde Hichilema utsite kubambelela kumasiko kwenda live liphumelele.
Most of the very successful economies are also anchored on strong culture. Japan, China, you can mention any. The UK itself, United Kingdom, is anchored seriously on culture, values, the heritage of the kings there, which is a symbol, or if you like, representation of the culture. We learn something from there, fellow citizens.
Lo mkhosi bewugubha kubukwa luhambo lwalesive sebenguni lesasuka esifundzeni lesatiwa ngekuthi KwaZulu Natal eSouth Africa namuhla. Lesive sahamba sibalekela Shaka ngesikhathi siholwa nguzwangendaba umholi webakajele. Umlandvo uthi zwangendaba wabalekela eSwatini enkosini Sobhuza wokuqala kwathi umnakabo wabuyela KwaZulu Natal washintsha ligama waba nguGumbi. Zwangendaba wachubeka wendlulela eSwatini waya eMozambique, Tanzania, waphethela eZambia lapho ashonela khona. Ndzabeni Eswatini TV kubika Themkosi Mavimbela eChipata eZambia.
Umkaloyo lowasungula libandla le-Divine Healing Ministries International umfundisi Zanele Shongwe utawuchubeka nokuba ngumholi waleli bandla lokuvela ngesikhathi umfundisi Zanele Shongwe ahlanganyele kokuqala nebazalwane be-Divine kusukela ahamba emhlabeni umyeni wakhe umbhishophi John Neshongwe.
Kube nemoya wekuthula nekulangatelela ebandleni le-Divine Healing Ministries ngesikhathi umkhokheli walo umfundisi Zanele Shongwe akhonda nebazalwane kwekucala kusukela kwahamba emhlabeni umsunguli waleli bandla Bishop Neshongwe. UmkaShongwe ucinise bazalwane ngemavi lawahlephule encwadzini yaJob esahluko ses-14 kusukela kuverse 7.
Asikemi-ke lokuthandaza, anikemi-ke nalokuthi nithandaze nanamuhla. Amen. Indlela iseyinze bazalwane asiqhubekele. Noma lesihlahla sesijutshiwe. Amen.
Even if the tree is cut,
but
the hope is there.
Amen.
Because if the leaves, they won't sprout.
Amen. So nasijutshiwe. But
the leaves, they will not die.
Ngoba kukhona lokukhona lapha sale timpanzi. Kunetimpanzi.
Because there are roots.
Amen. Kunetimpanzi noma bekungasanisela.
In the roots, even if there was no water.
Kodwa kusenemswakama.
But they are still moist.
Madivine usekhona umswakama.
They are still moist.
Usekhona umswakama.
It is still moist.
Sitawuphila.
We will live.
Ngoba ukhona lo mswakama.
Because it is still moist.
Sitawuhamba.
We will walk.
Ngoba ukhona lo mswakama.
Because the moist is still.
Sitamkhonda Jesu.
We will worship.
Ngoba ukhona umswakama.
Luphiko lwabomake kuleli bandla livete intokodo ngokuthi umfundisi Zanele Shongwe athathe ematomo okhola leli bandla.
Sisho lokho nje ndimanze ukuthi akukapheli lutho make indlela iyembili. Thina sibone wena ngisho iqiniso ukuthi siva sesifuthumele ngokuthi sesinawe sesiyathi indlela itawuqhubeka kahle.
Sihlalo waleli bandla Nelson Khoza uthi noma leli bandla lilahlekelwe insika litaqhubeka lithele izithelo letinhle.
Lokhu ke make ke abuyileke i-executive solo ikhona isengakantshintshwa nebafundisi solo bakhona batawukhona futhi lokho ukuthi bachubeke basebenzisane naye make nangendlela labe bavele basebenzisana ngayo nababe asesekhona.
Khoza uthi leli bandla litoyiqhuba ngemoya khona imisebenzi yekusita sive lebeyisungulwe ngumbishapi asaphila kanti emagatsha leli bandla latholakala kuleli nase South Africa abalela ku-27 etindzabeni kubika nathi lesithole Nambonga Dube kanye naseThabile Mamba sikamanzini.
Mkhulu Isaac Maziya wendzawo yasephumla mcashi ngaphansi kwemphakathi wasengevini ushele ngekhathi endlini ngemgcibelo ekseni ngetithuba tensimbi yesihlanu ngekusho kwemvodzakati yemufi incamsile Maziya lo mlilo usolakala ukuthi ubangwe likhandlela.
Umndeni wakamaziya ephumla mcashi ngaphansi kwenkundla yasesiphufaneni ucela lusito lwekubanjiswa ekufihleni mkhulu Isaac Maziya lobe yaneminyaka le-62 loshele ngekhathi endlini.
Mkhulu ubulewe sicabanga ukuthi likhandlela ngokubuka kwethu kube wathi uyagubhetela wagubhetela nala nelikhandlela lakhe lathi ngubeni wanganothisi yena ukuthi khandlela ngoba ngilo leli layida ingubo labese selokhela konke lokukhona la endlini ngokubuka kwethu le ndlela yasemkhaya ngoba thina itolo ekseni nabasivusa bathi kuyasha endlini ngamkhulu sivukile sagijima savula izivalo sakhanza vele ilanga liphuma ngamafastelo nentuthu sakhe emanti ngemabhakede sacisha samkhanza kusimkhulu vele usowushile sowuthulile hayi nosusaphefumula yini asehlile ambhedzeni but shothi bekazama naye wehlela phansi ngokuthi umuntu vele ngalesihlanu bekabuye esibhedlela esithobeleni ngale asthma yakhe nje lamalanga bemvuke kakhulu ngicabanga ukuthi bese lahosho nangile ntuthu wangakhothi nalokumemeta sesi sangamuva wakazanga khotha kumemeta nathi sisitwe ngilomunye bhuti lebeke ndlula emsebenzini naye uthi uhamba phitula ukujanjwa esitimela wabona kuvunya le ntuthu wagijima wetela khaya wamemeta seva na memeta sasesiyavuka siyagijima salapha endlini kamkhulu lasikhanze khona vele ish umlomdzala ukuthi ushile ushe kakhulu kusukela enyaweni tawufika la esuswini lesikubonile letandla ke ngasibekazama ngale tandla nato tishile kude shokunye lokuphumile la ngekhasi ngoba netimpahla bayigqokile konke bekushile nale vest lemhlophe bayigqombile la ngemuva beyishile ama BVD akhe bagqokile konke bekushile ingubo bethi semgibeni kusha nje konke kude lutho libekulandlini yakhe nenyalo nje siyabonga uNkulunkulu ukuthi usitile bokune handicap landlini yakhe ayikabhami ngicela iziveni sengwenyama kusam lokho lesinako nje kusibanga sibambisa ngoba vele simbofu kakhulu la khaya kude lesinako futhi sisele nje singabantwana kude lomdzala losele bese kunguye nje usho emndenini wakubo bese kunguye libekasele bonke bakubo bahamba emhlabeni.
Bakamaziya bathi abati ukuthi kufanele bathathe ini bayibhiceni nani kude bakhona ekufihla mkhulu njengoba nabo babandlula beswele. Umchumanisi wamaphoyisa nesive uvumile lo mbiko lonesifiso sekubambisa lo mndeni angashayela inombolo lethi 78165349 etindzabeni nginguThembelihle Magutshwa ephumla mcashi.
Kutemidlalo licembu leMbabane Swallows likhale phansi kuEzulwini United ngemagoli lamabili ecanzeni emidlalweni lodlalelwe enkundleni yamavuso Sports Center.
Emidlalweni eMTN Premier League ngelisomva enkundleni yasemavuso licembu lelibonakala lidlala kahle kulamalanga iEzulwini United belivakashele licembu leMbabane Swallows. Licembu leEzulwini United lithole igoli kuqala esigabeni sekuqala lelishaywe nguBanele Nkambule kwayiwa ekhefini yahamba imbili Ezulwini United ngegoli linye ecanzeni. Esigabeni sesibili kuwuteke lokushintshile kulomdlalo njengoba Ezulwini icubekile nekufuna igoli lesibili legcina litholile lelishaywe ngu-Andile Mamba. Yehlulekile-ke iMbabane Swallows kuthola igoli kulomdlalo waphela ikhale phansi ngamagoli amabili ecanzeni. Musa Manyathi locicisha licembu leEzulwini United uthi lo mdlalo abawuncobile bawuncobele bonke labafaka umfutho kuleli cembu lokufaka ekhathi nebaphathi kanye nebadlali.
Win lena attributed to the whole team management and players. Sadliwa kabuhlungu kumayalo. So the boys they wanted it more than Mbabane Swallows.
Ndiso gama lokucisha iMbabane Swallows uthi indlela ledlala ngalo licembu iya embili phinze libuyele emuva indvo lekudzinga ukuthi bayilungise masinyane.
It's a matter of progression kule building process yethu. Asiko consistency kwekuthi sesisukile kule level le we have moved to the next level. Siya embili siye emuva siye embili sime then ke ama results la njengalawo siwathola mangabe sitochubeka sente kanjalo. But ke it's a matter of kubuyela emuva to rectify some problems or areas to address.
Kulomnye umdlalo lokulandzele khona enkundleni yetemidlalo emavuso licembu leMbabane Highlanders lidlale ngekulingana nelicembu leMountain Pirates ngelicandza ecanzeni. Lobikela umsakato Eswatini TV kutemidlalo ngilinda Dlamini emavuso Sports Center kaManzini.
Satiphetha ngale do temidlalo sibahlole temakethe sibene police report.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience.
Asimze silemukele sakuvusela nawo losandzako sivulela lesikhathi sifuna kuva simo sempela somvo ukuthi ihambe kanjani nemchumanisi wamaphoyisa nesiva sikuvusele phindile sibonga ukuthi ube naso namhla ekseni ihambe kanjani impela somvo nasibuka nje igigaba letibikiwe emaphoyiseni.
Sivusele dadewethu sivusele ngaso sonke sibe sakangwana namhla ekseni siyabonga kakhulu kusisive njalo kusibeka kunempela sonto lebeyinkulu kangaka. Siyathi ukuthi bekungumcimbi lomkhulu webugano lapha ebuhleni kaHhohho. Sisebenzisene kahle kakhulu naso sive kulomsebenzi njengalokuthi inombolo bethu ibonakala sithulu kakhulu abantu lebe bakhona lapha. Lokhu ke kwenta kona ukuthi lo msebenzi vele sowunalo lesasibhale likhulu. Siyabonga ke ukuthi kude igigaba kwanyalo lesinato letimbi letibonakala sitendekile lapho. Lokuncane nje lokukhona mhlambe bothola sema-cellphone abantu bayalahleka aphindza atholakala. Siyathemba ukuthi nalaba mispace leto tikhoma tabo batatitfola nangabe kwendekile talahleka. Kepha-ke kwanyalo sisede nje imbiko yalokubi lokwendekile. Siphinde sibonga kakhulu nekutiphatsa kwabashayeli kuyo phela emigwaco nako besigcizelele ukuthi size asikubeke embili kuphepha sisasebenza yona imigwaco kakhulu kade kuyo lempela sonto. Nakhona-ke bonile kuba kuhle impela tingoti lesingaba nato ngileti le nale letingatsinzani mhlambe nawo lo msebenzi lebesikuwo ebuhleni. Sesibuya-ke etigigabeni letibikiwe njengempelasonto yonke nje-ke sibophe emadvodza-ke lamabili lapha eshiselweni ngekutholakala banesibhamu 9mm pistol netinhlamvu letintsatfu. Lesibhamu-ke lesibesicishiwe naleto tinombolo taso letivama ukuthi tibonakale noma sibhamu sibonakale ngato lekuthiwa i-serial number lokusho kona ukuthi vele emathuba ekuthi sekuganga asetulu. Sawuchubeka-ke nalolu phenyo lolu kulandzela kokuthi vele solo sacela ukuthi abantu abalethe tibhamu sibonile ukuthi babe bancane kakhulu labatilethile. Kuphindze kwathi nakamanzini nakhona-ke kwaboshwa indoda leneminyaka lengu-42 kudala nayo letfolakele inesibhamu i-revolver inetinhlamvu letisithupha. Bese Big Bend khona silahlekelwe ngumuntu lomdala loneminyaka lengu-81 kulandzela ukuthi indlu libekalele kuyo ilumeke umlilo lekusolisako ukuthi mhlawumbe kuyobe kukhona lokwasala lapho kuvutha kwagcina sekwakha lona lilangabi. Siyathemba ukuthi bawuthuthuteka labo labathihlobo takhe. Labatfolakele-ke emgwacweni yalelize bashayela banathile babengu-61 kule mpelasonto. Sawuchubeka-ke simaphoyisa sibone ukuthi sive siphephile ngayo yonke indlela. Siyade ukuthi labanye batawuhamba namuhla kusuka lapha ebuhleni siyawucela sive sichubeke nekusibambisa sijomise kakhulu kubashayeli ngendlela abatiphatha ngayo basashayelela sona sive lesiye kulo msebenzi. Asichubeke sibambisane ngaleyo ndlela. Sifisela wonke umuntu liviki lelihle sisho ukuthi sikhona simaphoyisa kwenta siciniseko sakuphepha kwesive. Siyabonga.
Sibonga kakhulu Phiko kusivetela loyo mbiko wayo impelasonto bekunguye Assistant Superintendent Phindile Vila kade sichazile ukuthi ngabe impelasonto ihambe kanjani nasibuka tikigaba letingena emaphoyiseni kule mpelasonto. Sathatha ikhefu siyabuya sachubeka nehlelo.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
Asimze sinemukele selo sichubeka nalo hlelo lefulo mhla ekseni sesinaye lapha make Joyce Vilane sizakumele ukuthi sibuya kumpelasonto lenkhulu impelasonto yabo Bechani sifuna ukuva ukuthi ngabe umsebenzi wobukhosi webugano ebuhleni uhambe kanjani. Sekuvusele make Vilane lo mhla ekseni ka Kusile Breakfast Show ingabe umsebenzi lomkhulu lapha ebuhleni uhambe kanjani.
Angivusele kumbukeli ekhaya ngisho ukuthi uhambe kahle kakhulu noma umcumo bomkhulu kangaka siyajabula kubona isasasa even la kaNgwane lapho kukhuthatheka khona tintsaba tikhathi emasiko nemihambo yakaNgwane ngoba ugano lisiko bokhosi kuhambe kahle tinombolo betinkulu njengoba nasibuka nje si-estimate besingabukela lapha kubo 30,000 plus. Kepha nje kuhambe kahle nalapho siye bese sithola lokuya ngasethunjini ngakhona. Bekune-order nje lekahle bonkosi kwahamba kahle sekuthi nje ngoba phela nakunebantu abaningi kuba nako ukuthi baningi konke bekumiswe kahle. Elitiko letempilo likhona lisinaka kuhamba kahle nje konke lokuyako anakwe njengoba besishito ukuthi abantu baphathe emaphilisi abo. Kube njalo nje bekunini nalo sithi engilikhohliwe lami kwanze ukuthi lanathwa onke malanga. Bakhonile baka-health ukuthi bamlungisele leyo package ya 2-3 days atobuyele ekhaya. Bekuhamba nabo bekukahle kakhulu nje ivakashi tethu tikhona tabo-South Africa boMpuleni bonke abalenzala bonke tabelo tonke nje cishe bekuthi khungo letisithupha lebe baphumelele betene libutho labo nalabanye-ke bantu tivakashi tenkosi ema-diplomats nabo bonke laba mgcoka bobabe boshifu kuhambe kahle kakhulu nebekunini ngoba ne-transport itiko letekuthutha imoto lo livele nje labathutha kahle bomake kwaphela kahle kusakhanya bomake bahambe kusakhanya bafike kahle nasemakhaya bafike bonke itoto laba labaqhamuke etinkundleni kwase kuthi-ke ngoba bese kuyashwilwa sithi kushwila-ke lokuvalelisa emakhosini sebuyavaleliswa-ke esigodlweni lapha-ke ebaleni lapho kuye bese kuyagidwa kusala lapho bathudane bavalelise enkosini ngoba lo bakhashana esisango esuke sesilifakile etimotolweni emabhasini libuyele emakhaya. Kusete-ke lesive ukuthi akuhambi kahle kwanyalo nje luthango luhambe kahle sicatshile-ke ukuthi kumbe khona lo tawushaya kodwa ekude lo phinze washaya kuzawo kunenkinga lekhona nguloko lesingakusho.
Njengoba usho nje make igama kokuthi lo msebenzi vele sowukhanga ngisho netivakashi uyasho lana kokuthi over 30,000 welibutho libe ingcenye yalo msebenzi lomkhulu nakangaka kusivetela nje sithomise ukuthi vele ngomkhosi lona lomcoka kanganani eziveni zamaSwati.
Umcoka kakhulu lo mkhosi ngoba uthola ukuthi bomake nabahlangene bashelana ligwayi naloku nenkinga yakhe ngeke asafanayo. Utafike athole ukusitakala nasebaxoxana labanye bomake. Yebo nasemakhaya uba nabo bangani. Kodwa isikhathi lesiningi ngalokuthi kuba naleti fundo letiba khona. Noma-ke libutho sekukhule lo mcumo uthola ukuthi nako sebajaka ukuthi hawu sifuna ngawumukela sifuna ngawuphakela sifuna lihiya. Kodwa siba nendlela lesenta ngayo ngoba siba nayo nemibhobho nje. Lesiyisebenzisako sibe sibafundisa abasemile noma-ke tiba khona nje tinto letibathi njabekelwane nakusa sisabuka singena entuthukweni noma singena ku-first world nina bekunini njengoba phela leti ndzaba te-culture leti siyathi ngesilungu ukuthi uba nabo cultural exchange programs vele kuba nemave lokhanza ukuthi emaswati ahlahamba ayele emaveni nabo babone ukuthi hawu kanti leti ndzaba akusiko ukuthi yamaswati kuphela le ndzaba yenteka emhlabeni wonke kuko konke nje lesingakusho ukuthi labanye nje uzwa ukuthi neZimbabwe neZambia bekuyiwe mhlawumbe encwaleni labanye bekuyiwe kuphi kunesuku lwe-culture kulelinye live bekunene emaswati siwavule emehlo kokuthi izaba te-culture akusito telive lakangwane kuphela ngilolo live nalelo live linemasiko alo nekuthi nje-ke nakusafundiswa tona tindzaba temabhizinisi njengoba tiko lakakhomesi belikhona nje sibayema nembhobho lapha netindzaba telukhethwe mathende ebhaliwe elukhethwe nama-exhibitions nje loko ukuthi kunala lamagazibo lo kuyabekwa ukuthi akhunjudwe emaswati ukuthi likhona tiko lelinjele lenta lokhu naloku kuthathwe naleti gcebhezana letinalemi le-information yokuthi litiko lelinje akhunjulwe kulenta naku nanaku nanaku. Timakethe nakhona bomake bayabenefit ngoba babe sebayetha bayothengisisa ukuthi phela Lusango noma lathi divakashi njengoba kuba nebantu labanyenti sebathanda kakhulu leli siko ngoba angeke sibe sesikhuluma emangabe kunini esithi nabo babe bakethu baphuma bobabe sesimangeni bathi nje lo athi ngifuna ukubona silothango kwenziwayo batowubuka kusikuhamba kahle labanye nabo bobabe bena lamabhizinisi awube kunene eshane tandla ke emakhosini ethu sithi bayethe wena waphakathi ukuthi sesivele kuneli politi lese silitholile la toleti indzaba temasiko ikakhulu kubo buganu ukuthi sitabothi nje nasi ibuya iphumule ngaleli langa langemsombuluko njengoba sivile nje sevele kukhulunyiwe ukuthi usasina sibuya ehlane bese liyatholakala liyaqala leli holide awu sithi bayethe wena maphakathi sithi Nkosi Ndlovukazi Mhlekazi siyabonga kuko konke loku kwendako etindzabo endzabeni temasiko.
Uthinze indzaba yabosomabhizinisi make gama ingabe vele kubuka nje njalo ngeminyaka ukuthi libanganani lisasasa noma ke linani labosomabhizinisi siyathi ukuthi kuba nalabo labathengisa imikhiqido labayakha ngaso lesithelo ingabe lo nyaka yini lehlukelele niyibonile nasibuka nje luhlangothi labosomabhizinisi kulomkhosi.
Boma ke bayasebenza ngoba ngaphandle nje kokuthi kunaleyo inkampani levela ikhicida Swazi Secret bomake kwabona nje sebayikhicitela bakhicita bojamu bakhicite bende lokuningi lebakwenda ngawo la kulobugani bavele bathengisele lisango ukhaze nje labo jamu vele bebabathengisa bayabathenge bantu kakhulu futhi ngoba ukuthola ukuthi naso lesithelo sinekwaso lesikwendako sengemafutha kugqobisa kuyagcotshiswa nangaphandle nje kokuthi sengilesithelo kuphela bomake benda lokunengi lokuyimisebenzi yetandla kuyathengwa futhi bathengela nebodwana lokusijabulisako ukuthi liyehla nalezinga le-pull down syndrome lengingasho njalo ukuthi bomake abasendelani phasi bomake sebayasapotana.
No, kuva nje kabanti nje make igama lokuthi siyathi ukuthi kulomkhosi kuphinze kube netinhlangano ovetele ukuthi nelitiko letempilo belikhona kepha kuphinze kube netinhlangano letehlukahlukene letifundzisa lona libutfo ngetindzaba letisemathini kufaka ekhatsi bo gender based violence ngabe nikubonile lokho kwendeka lo nyaka kukhona nabakufundzile bomake.
Singasho ukuthi ngendzaba yokukhula kwelibutho kube khona lokusithikambetisako kepha-ke sitakubuka ukuthi sikwenda njani bekufundiswa njengoba ngishito ukuthi kwendekile ekuseni nje sicalile safundisa ngale mvunulo ngoba kani vele sikwende lokho kungakayiwa le kulo mcimbi ukuthi bantu nakhona luthango belungaseluhle bekunene luconsa ngoba bevile labaningi bayalalela ukuthi abavunule njani two naleti fundo sifundisile ngalombhobho mabasalayinile lapha emalayinini sebaya layinele ukuthi bayothola lokho lokuya ngasethunjini besichubeka nje ngoba bese sibona sithola nale mibhobho vele lephathwa ngetandla vele kuphithitelwe vele kube mathini kungenelwa afundiswe kwendekile nine bekunini kusomabhizinisi kakhulu utiko lakasetco bebakhona nabo baphithitela lapha batshela bomake ukuthi abavule amabhizinisi bomake batophila litiko-ke baphethwe-ke litiko le-commerce bephinde futhi nabo khulisa umntwana bakhona lapha naye batshela bomake ukuthi niyabona yini ukuthi bantwana funa sibakhuliswe njani indzaba lenye lenkulu litiko letekulima bebakhuthata ngendzaba yekulima nekuthi-ke vele live nalisathuthuka lembili indzaba lenkulu kufanele sibe nekudla kangwane ulinywe ukhona ukuthi uwonge nemali yekuthi ungalima kanjani noma-ke nebaka-NDMA bebakhona nje nabo kubuka ukuthi mase kunaletahlakala sitakwenza kanjani kuze ukuthi emaswati aphile njengoba aphila sehlakalo kuba yindvo leqhamuka mhlambe etulu kumveli ngikhandi ilengeke ukwazi ukuvimba ukuthi usho ukuthi yendiwe ngumuntu seyivele nje yentakele semniko bese kuthiwa sehlakalo kuyabanjiswana-ke bekunene MDMA naye uyasho ukuthi uze nizame ukuvimba tehlakalo umvabo kwenda naku ukuthi nasekungesahlakalo atokhona kusizakala.
Sasiya ngasamaphethelweni nje make gama engabe kokugcina nje imphatho elibuthweni ngabe ibe ngilenjani ngoba siyakhumula ukuthi vele nihlale niyala nicela ukuthi bobhejane badiphathe kahle kulomsebenzi ngabe kwendekile lokho benselo nicela.
Ngidakhuluma nje mbukeli wami ngicale ngikule lo bhejane hayi kabi mbukeli wami umsakadi wami leli gama vele akusilo lelithandekako ngoba kufuna siyibambe kahle lento ngoba nakhuluma ngabhejane nje kuba ngathi nje sekuyinhlanjana ngoba ngaleswati umake nakavule sidiya nje uyahlonipheka kakutheni ngesiswati bowuthola ukuthi uyahlawuliswa nje umuntu engakhuzela akhuzele kumfati akhombise ngathi vele uyamsoma sitawusho njalo leli gama ngilobe silathi tu sithi-ke sine ngenhlonipho phezu komkhono uvusele thango ngiyavusela thango naso uthi mhlaba ebhejane akuhlamusi nene bekunene itolo like lekhudwa leli gama liba lihle kona kube mnanzi ungathi siga noma-ke kuyahaywa kodwa naso uthi ngihlaba ebhejane ungeke usho kumkamuntu ukuthi ngihlaba ebhejane ungasho mhlawumbe kulona lo seyingcuce noma entombini ukuthi vele nawe uyadibika uyadilahla kufuna sikulungiselele nekuthi-ke bekunene inhlonipho ibe khona lenkulu kakhulu lokhu sithi ibe khona nani nitibonele lene bemedia lebenikhona ngendlela nje isango bekumalayini emengalo konke nje bekwehlukile simangele nathi njengoba sisho nje singisho netransport noma sekuhanjwa bonke nje bekuheleza nje kuheleza kuhambe kahle bekunene tinzinamba leta letincane phela ngeke bese sisima etikwato ngoba vele la kunebantu labaningi khona kuba khona ukuthi kukhona lo bese kwenteka ukwenze ukuthi into lenganga mhlambe akufiki ngisho ku1% kodwa nje sishakandla siyabonga kakhulu nini.
Yevakala simakhulu make gama kusivetela sithambise ukuthi umkhosi uhambe kanjani ngo7 minutes before 7 sibathola emakethe sitawube ne traffic update.
Awuhlali phansi Wimbuke uyabalelwa msakanda awuhlali phansi Nembala uyamemeta msadoma futhi bambanani maswati misita nebuta uphela Nembala uyamemeta msadoma futhi awuhlali phasi sakati uyimvube uyesabeka sakanda vumi ngwenyamaya uyimvube uyesabeka msakanda uyabalekelwa uhle matho lesinyati ubebe imbethe mine mfokazana ngabe kwasamthuthumile ngiyamvuma awuhlali phasi sakati uyimvube uyabalekelwa
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience.
Asibenze sinimukele sesina Inspector Sehlo Dlamini kusiniketa simo semgwaqo unyalo ekseni asivusele Nkosi kuhambeka kanjani emigwaqweni live nyalo ekseni.
Anguvusele emthombeni ngiphize ngivusele nabo bonke labalaleleyo lebabukele wona umsakazo sibuko semaswati namuhla ekuseni cha vele uqinisile imigwaqo yelive sesiyihlolile ikakhulu nje ke indzawo letinengi kufaka ekhathi lapha elibonjeni awubelina nyalo nje ke ekuseni imigwaqo yethu imandi kufaka ekhathi nalapha endase eshiselweni nakhona imigwaqo yethu ihamba iba nabo kuba manje kwatise ukuthi besinawo umkhemekelo nyalo ekuseni ngaphandle kwaloko ekinzaweni ngekwehlukana kufaka ekhasi edolobheni lembabane kuyahambeka tiba nesemgwaqo kuyasebenza cishe tonke nasedolobheni lakamanzini ngaphandle kwanatiya leti lapha ngesheya eRemand Center letingasebenzela elangeni lamuhla kani nawukhuphuka ubheka lapha kubo Living Waters kunemsebenzi lochubekako lapho kuphakamiseka imoto letingena khona edolobheni kanye nato letiphumako basilungisela nje ke umgwaqo lapho kwendela ukuthi sitawuhamba sibe bantu labaphephile edolobheni ke lasenhlangano tiba nesemgwaqo nakhona tiyasebenza ngaphandle kwanatiyale tilapha eposini sekungamane kube kusho nje ke indzaweni ngekwehlukana kokuthi imfuyo iyabonakala ikakhulu nasibheka khona lapha kubo Thakasile emliba ikhona imfuyo la emgwaqweni nakhona nawukhuphuka ubheka lapha itulu bomsinda nakhona iyabonakala sikhanzeke neroadblock lapha eluve sisawuhlola umgwaqo awubantu vele banengi kakhulu lapho imoto tiyaphithitela kungaba ukuthi ngisho ke lapha ukuthi edolobheni lasembabane nakhona nawubheka khona le kubo mhlambanyathi lokho ukuthi asishayele ngalokukhulu ukucophelela lapho ikakhulu nasefika lapha phansi kuTyron nakhona siyibonile imfuyo nasikhuphuka-ke sibheka khona ehlane nakahoho esipiki umgwaqo wethu mncane ngekwakhiwa kwawo lokwenta kwekuthi kushayela kwakho akube secopheleleni lesedulu kanti-ke nasithatha nange umgwaqo losuka kuhelehele ubheka khona esiphofaneni kune-truck lapho na uyafika kunendzawo yasemposi kepha-ke iphumile eceleni kwemgwaqo timphawu tibekiwe kwendlela kwekuthi kucapheliswe bona lebasebenzisa wona umgwaqo kungaba ngiloko lenkubikako elangeni lalamuhla ngethembe ukuthi eMaswati ayawuthi aphephe asayisebenzisa ikakhulu imigwaqo yelive Thombe.
Kuyavakala Sibonga Nkosi kusivetela leyo mbiko nyele ekuseni sasalikhefu masinyane sibuya netindzaba tangephandle.
Kude lesinye isikhathi ngaphandle kwalesi
abaresearche bafunze
being risky means ukuthi nalokuwa kwayo kulula
nathi kufuna sente ukukhicita lokusembili
Welcome back. Let's take a look at international news. On Saturday, a 37-year-old Algerian national killed an elderly Portuguese man and injured 5 police officers with a knife before being arrested in the French eastern city of Mulhouse. Forensic experts say the man was diagnosed with schizophrenia. French President Emmanuel Macron described the attack as an Islamist attack. French Interior Minister Bruno said the country's authorities had tried to extradite him multiple times, but Algeria refused his repatriation.
This is the moment a knife attacker was arrested in Mulhouse in eastern France. He was apprehended after killing an elderly Portuguese man and injuring local police officers on Saturday afternoon. The attack took place near the city's Canal Market. Close by, people were attending a march in support of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The attacker shouted Allahu Akbar during the stabbings.
This terrorist act leaves no doubt that it's an Islamist terrorist act, given the expression of the terrorist.
The assailant was a 37-year-old Algerian national subject to an obligation to leave the French territory. France's Minister of the Interior arrived in Mulhouse on Saturday evening. While he drew a link between migration and terrorism, he also said the attacker had a schizophrenic profile which added a psychiatric dimension to his brutal stabbing. According to the minister, Algeria refused to take the citizen back 10 times after previous extradition efforts.
International law and international relations here in particular with the Algerian regime is about reciprocity. They do not apply a certain number of agreements that we have signed with them.
Franco-Algerian diplomatic relations have been rocked by multiple geopolitical rows, including recent disputes over the deportation of other Algerian citizens. Saturday's murder in Mulhouse may add further friction between the two countries.
The United Nations AIDS Agency warns that Trump's decision to suspend U.S. funding for PEPFAR, the world's largest AIDS control program, could lead to a drastic rise in HIV infections and deaths, potentially causing 6.3 million AIDS-related fatalities in the next 5 years. With many African countries, including Nigeria, relying heavily on U.S. contributions for HIV and AIDS programs, the funding freeze has caused disruption, particularly in hospitals where medication supplies are running low. While some hope for a return of U.S. funding, countries like Nigeria are exploring alternatives, including plans to produce retroviral drugs domestically.
It could be another catastrophic consequence of Trump's funding freeze. The United Nations say the decision to suspend contributions to PEPFAR, the world's largest AIDS control program, could spark a drastic rise in infections and threaten the lives of millions of people.
People are going to die because life-saving
tools have been taken away from them. In the next 5 years, we could have 6.3 million AIDS-related deaths, 10 times more.
A wide array of healthcare initiatives in Africa rely heavily on external funding. This is particularly true of HIV and AIDS-related programs, which draw up to 90% of their resources from foreign donors. Nigeria receives around $1 billion from the U.S. each year, around half of which goes directly to the healthcare sector. In Kano's Murtala Muhammad Hospital, staff have begun keeping HIV medication under lock. They say Trump's announcement caught them by surprise and warned their supply will run out in the next few months.
Yes, this is causing a lot of disruption, causing a lot of confusion, especially in unprepared situations. This should be gradual. There should be a process. There should be an agreement.
While hope remains that U.S. funding could return, some countries have begun to make their own preparations. Nigerian authorities recently said they were on track to start producing retroviral drugs in the near future, but didn't give a precise timeline.
On Saturday, Hamas released 6 hostages, but Israel did not release the more than 600 Palestinian prisoners that were expected to be freed in return. This was meant to be the 7th and final exchange under Phase 1 of the ceasefire agreement.
These Palestinian families spent their Saturday night waiting for good news, hoping for the release of their loved ones from the Offa prison in the occupied West Bank.
Here the people are all waiting, with women and children. Since early this morning, in the cold weather and the rain, we had to come inside this hall for the sake of the children so that they wouldn't get sick from the cold.
But after hours of waiting, those hopes were dashed as the Israeli government announced the postponement of the release of more than 600 Palestinian prisoners, despite the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. On Sunday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the freeing of any Palestinian prisoners will be delayed until Hamas ends its ceremonies while releasing hostages. Ceremonies which have been described by Israel as humiliating, while the UN and Red Cross have called the handovers cruel. The scenes were particularly shocking on Thursday when the bodies of hostages who died in Gaza were returned. And Hamas organised another ceremony on Saturday to mark the release of 6 hostages. An event which was closely followed by these Israelis who watched the release live from Tel Aviv.
Now we have today 6 of them. We pray that all of them come back, and we hope that the next step is going to be soon, very soon. They have no time.
The 6 Israelis freed on Saturday were the last living hostages from the group of 33 that Hamas had pledged to free during the first phase of the ceasefire agreement, an agreement that the Palestinian armed group is now accusing Israel of flagrantly violating.
Hamas released the bodies of 3 Israel hostages and a 4th unidentified woman Thursday as Phase 1 of the ceasefire deal with the U.S. designated terrorist group is set to expire early next month. The United States is pushing the warring parties to move forward with a second phase as Arab nations scramble to find an alternative to President Donald Trump's declaration that he will take over Gaza.
4 coffins returned by Hamas Thursday contained the remains of Oded Lifshitz, who was 83 when he was abducted, and 2 young children of the Bibas family. The last, thought to hold the body of their mother Shiri Bibas, held the remains of an unidentified woman, the Israeli military said, accusing Hamas of violating an already tenuous ceasefire. Hamas has not commented. The military said it was a violation of utmost severity by Hamas, adding to Israel's agony following the terror group's October 7, 2023 attack. Dozens of hostages are still in Gaza, including Guy Gilboa Dalal. VOA spoke with his brother Gal.
All we do is for my brother. All we do is to bring him back. All we care about is seeing him again. We miss him so much.
33 hostages were released under Phase 1 of the ceasefire. Their return increased pressure on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to negotiate for the second phase. But far-right members of his coalition want to return to fighting and end Hamas. Pressure also came from Washington, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was in Israel earlier this week, pushing to secure phase 2. Analysts say it won't be easy.
It's possible that they could agree to simply extend the first phase while they're negotiating the second phase, but getting formal agreement by both parties on exactly what the second phase will look like, I think is pretty tricky.
President Donald Trump has repeatedly said he wants to take over the Palestinian territory and rebuild it into the Riviera of the Middle East. On Thursday, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz said Gaza is, quote, a hellhole.
With unexploded ordnance, with debris everywhere, with no sewage, with no water, and President Trump has put forward a plan to deal with the practical reality that is 1.8 million Gazans now truly suffering.
Arab leaders have rejected Trump's plan and are meeting in Riyadh Friday, hosted by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, whose help Trump sought for talks between the U.S. and Russia to end the war in Ukraine. Some analysts say Trump's controversial Gaza demand could be an attempt to shake the status quo.
How successful it has been remains to be seen. Thus far, the only thing we've seen come out of it really is a strong push by Egypt and to a certain extent also by the Saudi government to reconstruct Gaza, leave the Palestinian people there without removing them.
The Egyptian alternative proposal will raise up to $20 billion over 3 years from Arab and Gulf states for Gaza's reconstruction. It excludes Hamas from a Palestinian governance committee in Gaza, which the U.S. designated terror group says it can accept. But it's unclear whether Israel or Trump can.
The fallout from U.S. President Donald Trump's comments criticizing Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky continued on Thursday, with Trump doubling down on his claims. Zelensky is a dictator because he has not held elections since Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022.
New Russian attacks on the Ukrainian cities of Odessa and Kyiv Thursday, as Europe reacted to U.S. President Donald Trump's claims that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has not sought an end to the war and is a dictator for not holding elections.
3 years ago, one country illegally invaded another, and since then the Ukrainians have been fighting for their freedom.
Some longtime allies noting a change in the U.S. security partnership.
En quelque sorte, l'Europe
Europe is realizing that it cannot delegate its security to other powers. The French government stands by Ukraine as it fights for its freedom, but also for our European security.
On Capitol Hill, Trump's claims about Ukraine have drawn strong criticism from congressional Democrats.
For President Trump to demand an election before achieving some sort of ceasefire or a just and lasting peace misunderstands or misrepresents who's the aggressor and who's the victim. President Putin of Russia has never been elected in a free and fair election.
Some Republican lawmakers also pushed back on claims that Ukraine started the war with Russia, but others have joined President Trump in calling for an election in Ukraine.
So our president is right that they haven't had elections in a long time, and they are basically under martial law. That's not good. When you claim to be defending democracy, they need to practice it.
And former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, current deputy chair of Russia's Security Council, wrote on X, "If you told me just 3 months ago that these were the words of the U.S. president, I would have laughed out loud." But one analyst told VOA Trump's criticism of Zelensky clearly repeats Russia's false claims about Ukraine.
We have to see this as a move by Donald Trump to undermine the legitimacy of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and in the worst case, as Trump advocating for Russia's position.
Zelensky met with U.S. envoy to Ukraine Keith Kellogg on Thursday in Kyiv, but a planned press conference was canceled at the request of the U.S.
With EU leaders scrambling to bolster their militaries amid doubts about the U.S. commitment to Europe's defense, Turkey, which boasts NATO's second-largest army, could be a key part of Europe's plans, especially in any peacekeeping operation in Ukraine.
Thank you so much.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky used a visit to Turkey on Tuesday to emphasize the importance of Ukraine's allies deploying soldiers to guarantee any peace agreement reached with Russia.
Two issues are very important: a strong Ukrainian army and the deployment in Ukraine from other armies like Europe and the United States, our partners.
Zelensky said he had discussed the issue with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, but that it was too early to reveal the outcome of the talks. While Erdogan has close ties with Zelensky, the Turkish leader has also maintained good relations with Russian President Vladimir Putin. However, with the second largest army in NATO, Turkey is well placed to support Ukraine.
If the parties will be agreed, Turkey maybe send out troops to peacekeeping operations. Why I say like this? Turkey joined many UN peacekeeping operations, and the Turkish army is very powerful.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov this week ruled out any NATO peacekeepers in Ukraine. But the importance of the Turkish army to European security could be on the rise, with the United States demanding that Europe take more responsibility for its own defense.
But we think it's an important part of being in a shared alliance together that the Europeans step up while America focuses on areas of the world that are in great danger.
Turkey's poor human rights record has strained its relations with the European Union. Analysts, however, say shared concerns over Russia are providing increasing common ground on security.
Turkey and European countries have the same geostrategic interest. If you ask to Turkey and Turkish policymakers, for them, the main threat to security and stability of the country and integrity of the country remain Russia.
European leaders met this week to discuss the security threat facing the continent. With the Turkish army dwarfing most of its European counterparts, Ankara says it can play a key role in Europe's defense.
European allies can be understood that without Turkey, we cannot continue the defense of the European continent and Euro-Atlantic security. And Turkey is ready to support this European security and defense capability? Yes.
Turkey is believed to have about 800,000 personnel in its armed forces, including reservists. Analysts say that as a sign of warming relations, European leaders have started lifting their opposition to key Turkish military hardware sales, as Ankara seeks to modernize its military, which it claims will be in the interest of all of Europe.
February 24th marks the 3-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with international efforts aimed at ending the conflict in progress. Amid criticism of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky by the new Trump administration, research shows the majority of Ukraine's population trusts Zelensky and is not ready to elect a president during wartime.
Volodymyr Zelensky became the president of Ukraine in May 2019, gaining more than 73% of the vote. Right after the election, his support marked a record for Ukraine, says Anton Hrushetsky, executive director of the Kyiv International Institute of Sociology, or KIIS.
About 90% trusted the president, but then this indicator dropped to 35% on the eve of Russia's invasion in 2022.
Hrushetsky says shortly after the invasion, support for Zelensky grew to 90% in a KIIS poll. The latest survey was conducted in early February.
Currently, 57% of Ukrainians trust Zelensky, 37% don't.
The decrease in support is quite common for Ukrainian society, says Olga Ivazovska, chair of the board at the democracy promotion group Civil Network Opora.
Ukrainian society is unique. It, in principle, does not support the government. For the entire period of independence, only one president has been re-elected twice. So the current rating of the president is quite high. At the end of Yushchenko's term, his rating was about 5%.
Viktor Yushchenko was voted out of office in 2010. But Zelensky rating, whatever it may be, is not a reason to talk about presidential elections now, says Ukrainian political scientist Mykola Davydyuk.
Freezing the war, ending the war, achieving peaceful settlements. This is a reason to talk about elections.
Zelensky's presidential term would have ended last year had it not been for the war. Ukrainian law prohibits elections under martial law.
From an organizational point of view, holding elections is a very difficult process because the line of demarcation, the front line, is not stable. The level of threat from Russia to any region of Ukraine is extremely high.
Opora has been monitoring elections in Ukraine for 20 years. Ivazovska says Ukraine needs at least 1 year from a ceasefire to start an election campaign. The country needs security guarantees and a solution for how to organize voting for military personnel and refugees, says Ivazovska.
We have 7.5 million citizens abroad, 65% of whom have the right to vote. If we launch elections, there must be every guarantee that we would complete this process because a rocket attack on election day will lead to a drop in turnout to 5 to 10%.
This can lead to the complete delegitimization of the government, which Russia will take advantage of, says Ivazovska. Davydiuk agrees.
There is a desire to change the authorities, but at the same time there is a consensus this cannot be done during the war for one reason. Putin will take advantage of this.
According to the KIII polling, about 70% of Ukrainians are against elections during the active phase of the war.
European shipyards are providing vital servicing contracts to vessels carrying Russian gas despite warnings that the profits are funding Moscow's war on Ukraine. Meanwhile, a new analysis shows imports of Russian gas to the EU rose last year.
A fleet of 15 specialized tankers sustains Russia's liquefied natural gas trade from its source in Yamal, high in the Russian Arctic. The so-called Arc-7 tankers are designed to smash through the Arctic ice, so they require regular repairs and servicing. Satellite tracking data shows the vessels are being regularly repaired at 2 European ports, the Damen shipyard in Brest, France, and the Fayard shipyard near the Danish city of Odense.
For Russia, if those European shipyards would be off limits, the operation would definitely kind of peter out over several years as the vessels would become more and more unusable.
The servicing is being carried out despite European pledges to stop buying Russian energy following Moscow's 2022 full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Kyiv says the profits fund the Kremlin's war. Before 2022, Russia supplied about 40% of Europe's gas. Most European countries no longer receive Russian gas via pipelines. It's a different story for LNG. While the US remains Europe's biggest supplier, a new study by the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis shows that the EU's LNG imports from Russia rose by 18% last year.
So then we started thinking, what's going on? What is happening there? Yamal has contract with certain companies in Europe. So we see lots of companies involved in all this trade. The issue is that Europe could say something, but these are commercial agreements. These are private companies that it's just business.
For some European countries, that business is worth more than the aid they're sending to Ukraine.
Spain imported $2.5 billion of LNG from Russia and last year, and they spent $500 million in military aid.
Meanwhile, many of the tankers carrying Russian LNG are owned and insured by European companies.
If the EU were to sanction them, then that definitely cuts into European companies' profits, and there's definitely losses. I mean, that's always what you have to weigh, right? Sanctions do cause economic harm.
There is no suggestion that the European shipyards, Damen in France and Fayard in Denmark, have broken any EU sanctions. Damen told Britain's Financial Times that no further servicing of the Arc-7 tankers was planned, quote, for the coming period.
Vice President J.D. Vance sketched his conservative view of foreign affairs on Thursday at the Conservative Political Action Conference, accompanied by foreign politicians who say they support President Donald Trump's agenda.
A warning for Europe, delivered by Vice President J.D. Vance.
Well, look, obviously, we're going to continue to have important alliances with Europe, but I really do think the strength of those alliances is going to depend on whether we take our societies in the right direction.
Vance spoke Thursday at the annual Conservative Political Action Conference. This year's gathering drew in right-leaning European leaders from Argentina, Britain, Poland, Hungary, and Italy. Analysts say they are watching the dissolution of one of the U.S.'s most important alliances play out in real time.
I think you'll have to take what's going on at CPAC very, very seriously. And, you know, what we're witnessing here is a separation of America from our traditional allies in Europe, from NATO. And this is an 80-year partnership that looks like it's fracturing right now. And so I think that that's a concern for Americans. It's really a concern for Europe.
Not all Europeans disagree with the Trump administration.
President Trump is right. As it was said by my prime minister, this war has to end because it brings us nowhere. It's crazy. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people are dying.
And Diana Jovanovici-Șoșoacă, a member of European Parliament who heads a far-right party in Romania, told VOA that the Trump administration invited her. This, she said, is her first CPAC. She spoke of the stances she shares with Trump, stances that, she says, led Romania's constitutional court to ban her from that nation's 2024 presidential race.
Because I have opinions against European Union, because I have opinions against NATO with these actions of NATO to create a war and something like that. And because of my statements of liberty, and because I was against vaccination COVID, and because I was against mask, and I was the voice of Romania, as you are a voice of America, in pandemic, they told me you have unconstitutional opinions, so you cannot go to be elected.
The CPAC conference was instrumental in vaulting Trump to the top of conservative politics. He addressed the meeting during his first term. This year, he speaks on Saturday.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams is facing mounting legal and political pressure over bribery and campaign finance charges.
Mayor Eric Adams' bribery and campaign finance trial, originally set for mid-April, has been delayed by a federal judge after the Trump administration's Justice Department requested the case to be dismissed.
Judge Dale Ho took the April trial date off calendar, but he didn't dismiss the case, at least not yet. He appointed a special counsel, Paul Clement, to argue against the Department of Justice's position on dismissing the case.
Romani says this legal maneuver is rarely used in federal court cases, making the judge's decision unusual.
It's not unprecedented, but it's not common. When the opposing parties want a case dismissed, it's almost always dismissed. The issue of what was the reason for the dismissal and is it appropriate? That's the issue that is going to be relitigated now that Clement is involved.
Some experts argue that the charges were improperly dismissed as part of a deal for Adams to cooperate with the Trump administration on migrant deportations from New York.
Trump's proposal coming from the Washington office was dismissing the charges without prejudice against Mayor Adams in order, frankly, to keep him dangling so that they could keep control of him as it relates to the president's agenda, especially around immigration. So this was an intentional way for Trump to continue controlling the mayor of the city of New York.
Adams supporters insist he has done nothing wrong.
There is not one iota of evidence that he have done something wrong with Trump. President Trump said so. The czar from the immigration said so. So these are opponents who never voted for him, who don't want him in office.
President Donald Trump also has come to Adams' defense.
It looked to me to be very political.
Kathy Hochul, fight back, remove Eric Adams.
Meanwhile, New York Governor Kathy Hochul has ruled out removing Adams from office, opting instead for state oversight to monitor his administration.
I have determined that I will not commence removal proceedings at this time. My strong belief is that the will of the voters and the supremacy and sanctity of democratic elections preclude me from any other action. I cannot deny the people of this great city the power to make this decision for themselves.
With legal delays, state oversight, and mounting scrutiny, Adams' political future remains uncertain.
U.S. small businesses are waiting to feel the effects of President Donald Trump's executive order imposing a 25% tariff on imported steel and aluminum.
It's canning day at Temescal Brewing in Oakland, California. Today, workers will pour craft beer into 6,000 aluminum cans. Next month, these cans will likely be more expensive. President Donald Trump recently signed an executive order raising tariffs on steel and aluminum. Imported aluminum will face a 25% tariff, up from Trump's 10% rate during his first term in office. Steel imports will also face a minimum 25% tariff, as Trump said he would no longer exempt any countries from his 2018 duties.
This is the beginning of making America rich again.
The Trump administration aims to boost U.S. manufacturing, particularly the U.S. steel and aluminum industries, which have struggled against cheaper imports. About a quarter of the steel used in the U.S. is imported, much of it from Canada and Mexico. The U.S. also imports about half its aluminum, mostly from Canada. But other industries are anticipating they will likely have to pay higher prices while domestic steel and aluminum production gets up to speed.
We could see a renaissance, if you will, for California and the U.S. Steel and aluminum industries, which would be a very good thing for our economy. The negative impacts are felt by everyone else.
Those could include increased costs that cut across many industries, he said.
Steel and aluminum are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. They're needed everywhere. Construction, building factories, just the impact. Cars is another good example. We need it in our everyday lives.
Here at Temescal Brewing, the focus is on getting beer canned and out. Over the past decade, craft beer, which used to be primarily delivered in glass bottles, shifted to aluminum cans, making breweries vulnerable to tariffs.
You know, for a lot of small places, it could be being open or closed due to, you know, tariff rising and everything. It's not something that we're stoked on.
This small brewery is part of a global trade ecosystem. Its malt comes from Canada, for example. The possibility of a bigger trade war worries its chief executive.
These things scare us because I think that we already are up against some significant headwinds, and now if we throw like, okay, suddenly our supply chain is going to get a lot more expensive, that just becomes an even bigger threat.
The U.S. tariffs on imported steel and aluminum are scheduled to go into effect on March 12th.
February is Black History Month in the United States. Celebrations across the nation include a White House reception with President Donald Trump and a parade in L.A.
In Los Angeles, California, Brent Burton marches in the annual Kingdom Day Parade, a Black History Month event celebrating civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. Burton was a Los Angeles County firefighter for 37 years and is a historian of black firefighting.
From the days of Sam Haskins in 1892 being the first, to the days of George Bright in 1902 when segregation started, to a segregated fire department where blacks only work at 2 fire stations, to now having seen 4 black fire chiefs in LA City Fire, 1 black fire chief in LA County Fire as the head of the department. There's been significant progress made, and we want to make sure those doors stay open.
Keisha Garcia came to the parade with her family. She says she's encouraged by black culture playing a more visible role in broader U.S. culture.
I didn't see that growing up. So being young, I didn't know that we could be anything we wanted to be. But now that our children can see equality and inclusion, then they can understand that they could be anything that they want to be too.
This year's Black History Month follows an executive order from U.S. President Donald Trump.
ending federal diversity, equity, and inclusion programs intended to offset workplace discrimination based on race, gender, and sexual orientation. The Trump administration says that those programs were discriminatory and deeply demeaning. Other critics of DEI say that everyone should be given the same opportunities. At the White House reception for Black History Month, Trump said support from black voters is one of the big reasons he was re-elected last year.
Today we pay tribute to the generations of black legends, champions, warriors, and patriots who helped drive our country forward to greatness.
Trump said Black History Month is a special time.
We love you all. We're going to work with you. We're going to make America greater than ever before. We're going to do it together.
In Los Angeles, parade marcher Anita Biggs said Black History Month is larger than politics.
We're not accepting anyone else's opinion of us. We know who we are. We know our history is deep. We know we can celebrate it all year if we want to, and we are happy to have the month of February where we do highlight our history.
Black History Month has been celebrated by every U.S. president since 1976.
That marks the end of our international news. It's 25 minutes before 8. We go for an ad break. Stay tuned. We'll be back.
Vismita, we are going to be talking about sexually transmitted infection.
Theodora, that's going to make people uncomfortable.
I agree. People are rolling their eyes now. But hold on, this is very important.
All right, what are we talking about?
Syphilis.
We're going to talk about syphilis today. So, Theodora, last time I heard about syphilis was in some movie, I think Out of Africa. Didn't Alexander the Great have syphilis? I thought we had this under control.
Syphilis is an ancient disease. In the early days, people die of syphilis, and it's incurable. But now, because of the discovery of benzathine penicillin, syphilis rates are going down in the 1940s, but it's rising again.
All right, so why should we be concerned about syphilis?
We should be concerned. Syphilis is increasing. Now we have about 8 million syphilis cases this year. And also you will note that syphilis is increasing in pregnant women, affecting their unborn and newborn children. And most importantly, this can result into stillbirths, prematurity, newborn infections that are going to be there for a long time.
So we don't always think about a disease like syphilis. Talk to us about who is at risk and how do you get it?
Well, you get it from sex. Mothers can transmit it to their children. And of course, syphilis can be transmitted through blood, like in blood transfusion. If you or your partners are having multiple partners, then your likelihood of having syphilis is increased. MSM, men having sex with men, and sex workers are also disproportionately affected.
And what are the symptoms of syphilis?
Well, majority of people with syphilis do not have symptoms. Sometimes it's even unnoticed by the healthcare provider. Untreated syphilis can be there for a long time. But of course, it starts with a primary syphilis. And in primary syphilis, you have a hard chancre. It's painless. Then it spontaneously resolves, it's untreated. You go into secondary syphilis, where you have rashes, which are usually not itchy, and they're usually found in the palms and in the soles of your feet. It is accompanied by flu-like symptoms, and it's also accompanied by lesions in your genitals. This will resolve spontaneously again. Then you go into latent syphilis, where you don't have any symptoms. This can take a long time. Then you go into the tertiary syphilis, where it affects your brain and your nerves, and also your heart. Remember that with syphilis, it's the greatest sneaky imposter disease. It can mimic any infection. But also remember that syphilis can be asymptomatic. So it's so important to get tested to know if you have syphilis.
Okay, that worries me, that you can have syphilis, it will keep having some symptoms, then it'll go away, and you can have syphilis and not know it. So when you're in that latent period, can you still infect others?
Oh, yes. During the time when you are asymptomatic, you can infect others, but you're most infectious in the primary and secondary syphilis.
Okay, so how do you prevent syphilis?
Syphilis can be prevented, of course. Prevention is key. First of all is have safer sexual practices. If you think you're risky, use a condom. Wait, I need to show you this, Vismita. This is the condom. This is so important. You should use them when you are having sex. Also, I think what's very important, because syphilis is treatable and it is curable, get tested and treated. If you have high-risk behavior or you're in the key population like MSM or sex worker, but also if you're pregnant, get screened and treated if needed. We also plead for healthcare providers to please provide respectful and discreet services. And most importantly, I think for policymakers, they need to provide us with more support on sexual health.
Those are very important points. Talk to us about why this disease is not under control.
It's not under control because culturally we are now having an increase in high-risk behavior. More people are having more multiple partners. There is increasing access to casual sex. There's decreasing condom use. And also, most importantly, other sexual safer behavior are not being practiced. Most importantly, also, there is already a decreasing access to sexual health, meaning there's limited sexual health services, but also people who have STIs or syphilis is very adamant not to go to a service because of stigma and discrimination.
Thank you, Theodora. Tell our audience, what is it that we need to do to prevent syphilis?
Prevent it by having safer sexual practice, use the condom, and test and treat.
Listen to Theodora. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stick with science.
That was WHO's Science in 5. We now move on to remarks to the Security Council by Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, on practicing multilateralism, reforming and improving global governance.
I now give the floor to the Secretary General, His Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres.
Excellencies, I thank Minister Wang Yi and China for convening this important discussion. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. Born out of the ashes of the Second World War, our organization was the result of a global commitment to, and I quote, save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. It also signaled a commitment to an entirely new level of international cooperation grounded in international law and our founding charter. To help countries move past the horrors of conflict to forge sustainable peace, to tackle poverty, anger and disease, to assist countries in climbing the development ladder, to provide humanitarian support in times of conflict and disaster, to embed justice and fairness through international law and respect for human rights, and to work through this Council to push for peace through dialogue, debate, diplomacy and consensus building. 8 decades later, one can draw a direct line between the creation of the United Nations and the prevention of a third world war. 8 decades later, the United Nations remains the essential, one-of-a-kind meeting ground to advance peace, sustainable development and human rights. But 8 decades is a long time, and because we believe in the singular value and purpose of the United Nations, we must always strive to improve the institution and the way we work. We have the hardware for international cooperation, but the software needs an update. An update in representation to reflect the realities of today. an update in support for developing countries to redress historical injustices, an update to ensure countries adhere to the purposes, principles and norms that ground multilateralism in justice and fairness, and an update to our peace operations. Excellencies, global solidarity and solutions are needed more than ever. The climate crisis is raging, inequalities are growing, and poverty is on the rise. As this Council knows well, peace is getting pushed further out of reach, from the occupied Palestinian territory to Ukraine, to Sudan, to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and beyond. Terrorism and violent extremism remain persistent scourges, and we see a dark spirit of impunity spreading. The prospect of nuclear war remains, outrageously, a clear and present danger. And the limitless promise of emerging technologies like artificial intelligence is matched by limitless peril to undermine and even replace human thought, human identity, and human control. These global challenges cry out for multilateral solutions. The Pact for the Future, you adopted in September, is aimed at strengthening global governance for the 21st century and rebuilding trust, trust in multilateralism, trust in the United Nations, trust in this Council. At its heart, the Pact for the Future is a pact for peace, peace in all the dimensions. It puts forward concrete solutions to strengthen the machinery of peace, drawing from proposals to the new agenda for peace that prioritize prevention, mediation, and peace building. The Pact seeks to advance coordination with regional organizations and ensure the full participation of women, youth, and marginalized groups in peace processes. And it calls for strengthening the Peace-Building Commission to mobilize political and financial support for nationally owned peace-building and prevention strategies. The Pact also includes the first multilateral agreement on nuclear disarmament in more than a decade, new strategies to end the use of chemical and biological weapons, and revitalized efforts to prevent an arms race in outer space and advanced discussions on lethal autonomous weapons. It also calls on member states to live up to their commitments enshrined in the UN Charter and the principles of respect for sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the political independence of states. It reaffirms unwavering commitment to abide by international law and prioritize the peaceful settlement of disputes through dialogue. And it recognizes the role of the United Nations in preventive diplomacy. And it reinforces the need to uphold all human rights, civil, political, economic, social, and cultural. It calls for the meaningful inclusion of women and youth in all peace processes. And it specifically calls on this Council to ensure that peace operations are guided by clear and sequenced mandates that are realistic and achievable, with viable exit strategies and transition plans. But the Pact does even more for peace. It recognizes that we must address the root causes of conflict and tensions. Sustainable peace requires sustainable development. The Pact includes support for an SDG stimulus to help developing countries invest in their people and tackle their challenges, like moving towards a future anchored in renewable energy. It includes a revitalized commitment to reform the global financial architecture to better and more fairly represent the needs of developing countries. And it includes a global digital compact that calls for an AI governance body that brings developing countries to the decision-making table for the first time. Excellences.
Excellencies. The Pact also recognizes that the Security Council must reflect the world of today, not the world of 80 years ago, and sets out important principles to guide this long-awaited reform. This Council should be enlarged and made more representative of today's geopolitical realities. We must also continue improving the working methods of this Council to make it more inclusive, transparent, efficient, democratic, and accountable. These issues have been under consideration by the General Assembly for more than a decade. Now is the time to build on the momentum provided by the Pact for the Future and work towards a greater consensus among regional groups and member states, including the permanent members of this Council, to move the intergovernmental negotiations forward. Throughout, I call on members of this Council to overcome the divisions that are blocking effective action for peace. The world looks to you to act in meaningful ways to end conflicts and ease the suffering these wars inflict on innocent people. Council members have shown that finding common ground is possible. From deploying peacekeeping operations, to forging life-saving resolutions on humanitarian aid, to historic recognitions of the security challenges faced by women and young people, to the landmark Resolution 2719 supporting African Union-led peace support operations through assessed contributions. Even in the darkest days of the Cold War, the collective decision-making and vigorous dialogue in this Council maintained a functioning, if imperfect, system of collective security. I urge you to summon this same spirit, continue working to overcome differences, and focus on building the consensus required to deliver the peace all people need and deserve. Excellencies, multilateral cooperation is the beating heart of the United Nations. Guided by the solutions in the Pact for the Future, multilateralism can also become an even more powerful instrument of peace. But multilateralism is only as strong as each and every country's commitment to it. As we look to the challenges around us, I urge all member states to continue strengthening and updating our global problem-solving mechanisms. Let's make them fit for purpose, fit for people, and fit for peace. Thank you.
And that was the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres speaking at the UN Security Council. It's 10 minutes before 8. We go for an ad break. Stay with us.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.sz. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
There is a disease so contagious that if a child infected with it walks into a classroom, every child that is not vaccinated will most certainly get infected. We are talking about measles today with our expert, Dr. Natasha Crowcroft. Welcome, Natasha. Talk to us about why parents need to be concerned about measles.
Measles is not just a rash. It's a very serious infection that can put your child in the hospital. 110,000 children died from measles last year. It can cause blindness, it can cause deafness, it causes pneumonia, and in worst case, it causes death. And also a brain infection that occurs later on, years later, after a child has apparently recovered from measles. So all of these complications of measles, they're devastating, but they're all completely preventable through vaccination.
Why are measles cases increasing all around the world?
So measles is on the rise because not enough children have been vaccinated. There was a big fall in the number of children being vaccinated during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so there's a big gap in our immunity. About 22 million children missed out completely on their measles vaccine in 2023, and that's led to big outbreaks of measles all around the world, with a big increase in the number of cases.
What about the measles vaccine? Is it safe? Is it effective?
It's safe, it's effective. In fact, it's so effective that the measles vaccine has saved more lives than any other vaccine we have in our routine program today. We estimate about 60 million, or in fact more than 60 million children's lives were saved by measles vaccine in the years since the year 2000. So imagine that, there are 60 million children who are alive and healthy because of vaccination, which is a miracle.
Now, the measles vaccine has to be administered at a certain age, and there's a second dose. Talk to us about it.
The first dose is routinely given at 9 months of age in countries where there's quite a lot of measles around to get protection in early. But in countries where there's less measles, we leave it a bit later, till 12 months or older. And then the second dose is given at least 3 months afterwards. It can be a few years later, depending on the country's schedule. So 2 doses is really needed, but with 2 doses, you get close to 100% effectiveness against measles, which is fantastic.
So this is one of the most infectious diseases, and we have an effective vaccine that has saved millions of lives. If you were to speak to parents, what would be the one thing you would want them to know about measles and how to protect their children?
As a parent myself, I know that the most important thing as a parent is to make sure your child is safe and healthy and grows up to be healthy. Measles vaccine is incredible because it's so effective at preventing measles, and measles has such devastating impact that the impact of the vaccine, which has saved 60 million lives since 2000, it actually makes children healthier, so they do better at school. It makes economies flourish. It's a fantastic way to protect your child for communities. So I would just say the one thing you need to know as a parent is that vaccination, it's safe and effective, and it's the best way to protect your child.
Thank you, Natasha. So that was Science in 5 today. Until next time, then stay safe, stay healthy, and stick with science.
Kude lesinye isikhathi ngaphandle kwalesi.
Aba research bafunze.
Being risky means ukuthi nalokuwa kwayo kulula.
Nathi kufuna senze ukukhiqiza nokusebenzisa.
Asimze sinimukele ngo 3 minutes before 8 o'clock sasifika emaphethelweni ehlelo lomhla ekseni sethemba ukuthi nitabane langa lelihle, a brand new week, a brand new day. Sethemba ukuthi konke lenifisile kudo wendeka ngale kwaloko mina elungelele. We'll see you tomorrow. Nisala kahle, have a lovely day.